everyone, welcome back to my channel, Bevvy with Beth. My name is Beth and I am back here again with that good old Yorkshire tea. And today we're going to be talking about foods that heighten our insulin response, so the ones that we want to avoid if we're trying to keep our insulin levels low. So I just have to remind you all that I'm not a registered dietitian and I'm not a doctor. So although I've done my own research into foods that are generally known to be high insulin response, I'm not qualified to tell you what you should or shouldn't be eating. So if you are planning on cutting out any foods or including foods into your diet that you've never tried before and you're not too sure about them, then please do speak to your medical professional before doing so. Don't take my word for it. But with that said, I think now we can just get straight into it.
So blue, me pressing through. I can't forget the day we met. Your smile so bright, it made me swoon. Our love is like a summer's day.
Okay, so I haven't got the best information on this one. I feel that there needs to be more research done on it, not just from my point of view, but also just in general. We need to understand this better. And I kind of touched on that a little bit when we were talking about low GI foods, in that, especially when you get the insulin resistance diagnosis along with your PCOS, that the advice, of course, it's obvious to lower your sugars, and what your ultimate goal is to lower your insulin response. And yet there doesn't seem to be a general understanding, acceptance of the fact that it's not just sugar that causes an insulin response, and that you need to know about lots of other foods, not just sugars. And so I've got a list here that I found online of some of the foods that are very high insulin responses. And of course you've got the obvious stuff, the sugar. They've used, for an example here, jelly beans, which are, it's just sugar, isn't it? So yeah, of course, sugar is the main reason why we release insulin. But there are other things that we maybe don't think about quite so much. And for me, the three that stood out first of all was actually right after jelly beans is potatoes. And then we've also got in there baked beans and white bread. So for me, those three things are the ones that don't really get talked about. We don't talk about potatoes as being a bad food for diabetics, for insulin resistance, for inflammation diseases. They're just kind of passed over as, you know, being a healthy food. Even if you swap into things like sweet potatoes, yeah, okay, they're lower than normal white potatoes, but they still are. And same with beans. And I think some of it has to do with the vegan movement. I don't know how better to say it, that if you're not going to have animal protein, beans are a really good place to get protein outside of animals. But we don't really talk about the side effects that could have for people who are struggling with things to do with insulin. And it's one of the things I know I've mentioned a couple of times before about when I cut kidney beans out, and you know that had other complications, but I don't think I've ever really spoken about how much difference that I found when I cut beans out. That it's difficult to narrow it down, because I cut out beans as well as things like rice and pasta. So, you know, how much was the rice and pasta and how much was the beans? Now, I cut out beans, pasta and rice because I was eating brown rice and brown pasta because I had leaky gut syndrome, which I spoke about in a few videos ago. I had that condition which was being aggravated by fibre, and those things are very high in fibre. but they're also very high in starch. So they were also causing me issues with my insulin resistance and aggravating my PCOS as well. So I think for me, those are the top 3 things. And I think I might have said white bread, but I actually meant to say whole wheat bread because, I mean, they're the same. White bread is obviously worse. It tends to have more added sugar in it anyway, but it actually also includes the whole wheat bread. So just bread in general is not a good idea. And those are the first 3 for me that I was really like, They're the things that don't get talked about enough. And the 4th thing that I really wanted to discuss as well is actually fructose. It's another thing that people just really don't think about, don't talk about. I mean, that we're totally unaware that for people with conditions where they can't handle sugar, fructose is actually the worst sugar. It's the worst. And the reason it's the worst is because it goes directly to our liver. And when we have things where our insulin levels are very high, one of the biggest problems with that is that it stops us from being able to access the stores of sugar that we've put into our body. Now, this obviously causes, originally the main issue that a lot of us struggle with is the weight gain, in that even if we change our diet, if we don't reduce our insulin levels enough, we can't access the fat stores, and that weight is never lost. It just stays there. Maybe we don't put any more on, but we're definitely not losing any. But it goes for the same with the liver. We use the liver as a storage device for our sugar as well as fat. And so when we then can't access the store in the liver, we can end up really badly damaging our liver and end up with fatty liver disease. I mean, I think that's quite extreme. I haven't heard a lot of cases of people with PCOS really struggling with their livers, but it's a danger. And if we don't fix it soon enough, then if there are other things that are also hurting our liver that we're doing, that toxins that we're eating, and do you know what I mean? It's like, you need your liver. We don't want to put any added pressure onto the liver that we don't have to. Like, it's an amazing organ and we want it to work well. You know, nobody wants to give up alcohol. It's just, you don't want to do that. So look after your liver now. And fructose goes directly to the liver. It doesn't go through the normal process of glucose, which means if you're then not able to access that store, well, then every bit of sugar, every bit of fructose, to be clear, every bit of fructose that you're eating is just being stored. And that long term just isn't going to be good for us. Which means they tend to use fructose in a lot of things because it's considered a more natural sugar, even though sugar is, anyway, it's considered a natural sugar. So it's one of those things that we need to watch out for in ingredients lists, that if it, you know, separates out that fructose, that doesn't necessarily mean it's actually better for us. And then obviously fruit is healthy for you. I'm never going to say that fruit isn't good for you. It's got tons of vitamins in it that are really good for us, and it tastes amazing. It's really good at hydrating us, which sometimes people can really struggle with when they don't really like water. Yeah, there are a lot of good things with fruit. Unfortunately, when we have a condition that's not under control yet, we have to reduce fruit. It just isn't going to be healthy for us in this particular circumstance. No matter how healthy it is in general, there are other ways of getting those vitamins and minerals without the added danger of the sugar that we can't process properly. Those are kind of like the top things that came out of it. And one of the things that I want to look at a little bit more to get an understanding of how it works, particularly since I am on a ketogenic diet, I do use animal protein as a source of protein. And of course that does actually cause an insulin response. It's not as much insulin as it is for sugars and fruits and grains and beans, but it is still there. So I think it's another thing that's always worth looking at, and it's part of the reason why I felt that the ketogenic diet in particular made a lot of sense, is that because you're getting a lot of your calories as well as a lot of nutrients from fat, it means you've already got your insulin response really, really low when it comes to carbohydrates and sugars. that then when you are eating the meat to get your protein, since it also very often comes with fat as well, that you just, the whole thing, the whole plan, the whole idea of keto is kind of perfect for keeping insulin levels low. But it's definitely worth looking more into the meats that you're eating. So I notice here that kind of like, so fish is a higher insulin response than something like beef, for example, and yet beef is a higher response than something like chicken and turkey, and eggs. They're all lower. They're kind of the lowest for the meats, and then but we've also got duck and bacon as kind of like the lowest when it comes to meats. And it's quite interesting to look at the milks as well. When you handle milk differently, it has different levels of sugar, and so then, and sugar and proteins, and so then how that all interacts. So that's kind of what I've been learning on the insulin index. And the top foods, like I say, is the obviously the standard sugars, the fructose, beans, and even whole grain breads are kind of the top ones, and then protein is the other one to kind of look at. So those are the kind of 5 things that I've learnt about foods that I've learnt are bad for insulin responses. So hopefully that can help you out a little bit. Obviously always do your own research and look into what it is that you're eating and what's going to work best for you. But I just thought that was quite an interesting list. But it definitely needs more work. It's not comprehensive enough for me. So we'll keep working on that, and every time I find something new, I shall bring that out to you. Do give the video a thumbs up if you learned something new. Leave me a comment with any questions that you might have or any information that you found, because again, if you find something that can help me, then that's kind of what I'm here for. So leave me a comment if you've got something to share. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.